It's an interesting idea of essentially what photography is in terms of, is it a tool for documenting, or is it a tool for art? And how much, or and how much does that blur? And I think very often you get people with quite kind of extreme views on that. There are some people who think that all the camera is a tool for documentation. And then there are others for whom, no, photography is art. I mean, and then that varies from country to country as well. I think, for example, I think in America, there's much more of a history of a sense of photography as an art form than there is in the UK. There are still pockets in the UK where it's very difficult to get photos recognized as an art form. It's seen much more as, a technical exercise rather than necessarily an aesthetic one. And any aesthetics that come into it are almost accidental and not really part of what photography is. And I think, interestingly, when we look at some of the, some of these photos are definitely documentary. That what interests us in them is the documentary. So when we see an old photo of Dumfries and we go, oh, I recognize that bit, I'm overlaying my own understanding of this and seeing how that's changed. So the documentation of that is really interesting. And yet at the same time, there is this strong aesthetic side gone into it, as we said about that idea if somebody moved left or to the right a couple of feet, that photo maybe wouldn't look quite as good. So there's the use of aesthetics to create a narrative for us. So we're not just seeing things as they are, we're seeing things as we're led to see them, which is a different thing. But also then there is that notion of the art side of it, like the young girl with the lamb, where it is directly trying to imitate art, or imitate maybe specific art. I've done various photos before now where I've done them in the style of a 17th century Dutch master painting, for example, where if you take the same tropes, you use that style of lighting and you use that kind of material and you have somebody in a specific kind of pose, that photo can look very painterly. And it's not about documentary as such, it's about creating something which looks slightly more artistic. Or you have a group of people gathered around a table. Whenever I have a group of people around a table, everybody goes, oh, Last Supper. It doesn't matter if the photo looks nothing like the Last Supper whatsoever. It's the idea, there's a group of people around a table. It's the bit everybody latches onto. But yeah, a lot of the photography I do is constructed narrative, where I am emulating ideas from the art world. And I'm creating things which look theatrical or cinematic, even, where you are trying to create a story within what you see. So that there's always this sense of, when you're looking at it, there's something bigger than what you're actually seeing. You get I always say the difference between a snapshot and a really interesting narrative photo is the snapshot tells you everything you need to know within the photo, usually within half a second. Here's my lunch. Here's me and the wife in Marbella. There's not really a lot else to say. The interesting narrative photo, you're going, oh, I wonder what happened just before that photo was taken, or what happened just after, or what's happening out with the boundaries, just, or behind the photographer's shoulder, or just out of sight behind over there. And I think the moment you start asking questions, this moment the viewer starts asking questions, that's when you're into narrative, that's when you're into storytelling, that's when the viewer is bringing part of themselves into the questioning process. The picture just suddenly expands and becomes so much bigger.
I think you see that phenomenon all the way back to, in Scotland here, Hill and Adamson, working in the 1840s, the early 1840s. We're through their primary subject, photographs of people, you get all of those sensibilities you just mentioned through their subjects, and they're as suggestive in many cases as they are depictive of the physicality of it. And of course, this was something that, as you move into the 20th century, photographers picked up on again. And even again, sticking here in Scotland, and of course with the MacKinnon Collection, you had photographers, like James Craig Annan, who, in service of sort of pictorialist ideals at the turn of the century, were looking back decades before Jehill and Adamson, and saying, look, this is what photography can do. Photography does have the capacity to address us on more emotive levels, and more intellectual levels, in fact, and of course is something that we can manipulate to serve us in those ways.